Good evening, everyone. My name is Moska Rokay, and I will be your main host for tonight's webinar. From here on out, just so you all are aware, this webinar will be recorded. I'm going to start the webinar with a land acknowledgement that will be largely specific to where I live and work and where the University of Toronto situates. Today's Toronto, Ontario, Canada. But I do encourage you all to reflect on the Indigenous lands you are joining us virtually from today. So we'd like to acknowledge the sacred land on which the University of Toronto operates. Um, Toronto has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee peoples, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. The treaties that were signed for this particular parcel of land are collectively referred to as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. So before we do continue, I do want to mention that this webinar called obviously Contributing to the Muslims in Canada Archive is the third webinar and the last webinar of a three-part series called The Power of Your Story Through Your Stuff. For those that missed the last two webinars, they were both recorded and will be available on the Institute of Islamic Studies website and our YouTube channel. We can also provide links to the recordings in the follow-up email that everybody will be receiving at the end of this webinar. But tonight is mostly about you. So to be honest, it's about how you can get involved and about how you can be a part of this initiative, how you can contribute. We'll begin with a quick introduction of just the team behind MiCA, the Institute of Islamic Studies, including meeting the director of the Institute of Islamic Studies at the University of Toronto, Dr. Anver Emon. From there, I'll give a brief explanation of what MiCA is, the Muslims in Canada Archive, and what archives are. This would be important, especially for those that didn't attend the last two webinars. Next, I'd like to take the opportunity to talk to you all about how you can contribute to or donate records. I'll answer some comment questions like what are records, and I'll go over the steps of our archival records donation process. What happens when you donate your records. And I'll end that section with a brief explanation about how your records are then accessible to the public. For the next section, Dr. Emon will talk a little bit about the importance of financial support and how you can contribute to MiCA financially. And following this, I'll go over some more like intangible ways you can contribute to MiCA with your time and your knowledge. And finally, we'll end off with a Q&A. So we want to make sure today is more heavily focused on the Q&A so we can answer a lot of questions that we've been having, from, especially from the last two webinars. And this is basically how our night will go for today, for tonight. So again, welcome to tonight's webinar. And like I already mentioned, my name is Moska, and I'm the Digital Humanities Research Fellow at the Institute of Islamic Studies at the University of Toronto. And I'm also the coordinator and the lead of the Muslims in Canada Archives here at the Institute. And the other wonderful person on the screen is Dr. Anver Emon, and he's the director of the Institute of Islamic Studies. I don't know, Anver, if you want to take a few minutes just to talk about yourself, maybe.
Well, sure. I wanted to say thank you to all who've joined us. MiCA is a project that it's a project with a lot of heart. It's a project that I believe in. I'm trained as a medieval historian of the Muslim world, 9th to 15th century. So in many ways, the study of Muslims in Canada is not my area of study. But as someone who lives in Canada, who studies Islam in Canada and thinks of Canada as a place of knowledge dissemination and production, I'm mindful that we really need to think about storytelling as part of the way in which Muslims themselves feature in the Canadian narrative. And so, as director, one of the first things I did was do a survey of various organizations, thinking what are the key things we could do as an institute located in a public university in a democratic society like Canada, and being a repository for materials, primary sources, as historians would call it, for you to tell different kinds of stories, for others to come and tell stories well after we're all long dead, is the key. That's what this is about. This is about creating a repository of memories that may or may have a life well beyond any of us who are the creators of the memory, the creators of the document. And so the historian in me loves this project, but also it's a project that is about challenging the dominant narrative of Muslims in Canada, one around security and threat. In this context, MiCA provides us the immeasurable possibilities. And so we're indebted to Moska, of course, for her leadership of this project. She's really, she's the lead here. So you're gonna see me disappear into the background. And this is where Moska will talk to you literally, if the first session was really about explaining what archives do and the importance of archiving, and the second session was about how do archives reflect or not reflect the Muslim story in Canada. Today's session is the logistics. Like, how do you go through your stuff to think about allowing us to steward it into the future? And by us, it's not me and Moska individually. It's an institution that will survive all of us. And so that's what today is really about. It's about giving the brass tacks, the details, the logistics. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining, and I'm going to leave it to Moska. I'll come back towards the end and help with the Q&A. Thank you, Moska, very much.
Thank you, Anver. And just like Anver mentioned, just the first webinar was about just sort of launching and explaining what archives are and what they do. But I will take just a few minutes today to also do that, just to get everybody up to speed if not everybody attended the first or second webinar. So I will do that first. So the Muslims in Canada Archive is, or MiCA for short, I know I've said that acronym a few times already. So the Muslims in Canada Archive is a collaborative and participatory archival initiative out of the Institute of Islamic Studies at U of T to collect and share the history and documentary heritage of Canadian Muslim communities. So we're fortunate enough to have the support of the Ontario Provincial and Canadian Federal archival bodies, so Archives Ontario and Library and Archives Canada, respectively. They are especially important for providing some guidance and helping me out in understanding archival practices in other institutions. And so I'm able to apply those, the ones that we can apply to MiCA. And we also have the relationships, and we also have relationships and partnerships with the National Council of Canadian Muslims, Canadian Council of Muslim Women, the Muslim Association of Newfoundland and Labrador, In Spirit Foundation, and the Tesla Institute, all of whom we initially consulted for this project. So far, we have consulted with these organizations, but we're also always open to growing and creating relationships with other community organizations and other members of the community for advice, including anybody that's on this call. And finally, our academic partners include the University of Toronto Libraries, Memorial University, and Université Laval. As an archive, MiCA is essentially a repository, like Anver mentioned, a home for physical and digital documents. So these archival records become your legacies, and I'll explain how that works at the end throughout the night. But they become the records that are donated to archives. They become primary sources, just like Anver mentioned, and are evidence of your life, your words, and your contributions to society. So MiCA's aim in general is to collect and share the history and documentary heritage of Canadian Muslim communities, Canadian Muslim individuals. And as we'll mention later, we're actually starting first with Ontario. Okay, so this is really the meat of tonight's content. So you might be wondering exactly how we do any of the things I just mentioned. So how exactly do we, I know all of us, including all of you, how can you ensure that Canadian Muslims are documented in the historical record? Maybe you're wondering what a record is, since I've mentioned it so many times already. And I'm here to talk about how you can support and contribute to MiCA today. And we'll start that by talking about how you can donate archival records. This section of the webinar will focus on what MiCA does as well, so its most basic processes, and then I'll go over what a record is. We'll talk about the steps to donate your records. So once you do donate your records, what happens to them? What do we do with them? What do I do with them? And also talk about how the current pandemic has affected the processes, this process as well. So how do we ensure we capture the voices, experiences, and contributions of Canadian Muslims? What do we do exactly? And well, this slide we have, just on the slide in front of you, we have our 4 basic sort of processes of an archive: collecting, organizing, preserving, and making accessible. I'll start first with the first 2, so collecting, organizing. I'm just going to talk about what I mean by these terms, really. So as MiCA collects, what does that mean? So we acquire the records of Muslim individuals, families, or organizations in Canada to document the history and documentary heritage of Muslims in Canada. So this is kind of like our collecting, our collecting priority. Because we're just starting out, like I mentioned, we're beginning our efforts in Ontario first, and then through our many partnerships and relationships, we hope to branch out to the rest of Canada in the next few years. After that is organized. So MiCA organizes. So once we have records in our facilities, once you do donate your records, we'll arrange and describe them according to both professional archival best practices and community needs, so that they can be easily found and understood by all users. This means that a donation of records will be assessed and looked at by a professional archivist. So in this case, that's me. And I'll look through everything, I'll organize it, and after taking a look at everything, I write up a description of the donation of the records that will be available to the public. So this description is used by the public so that they may have a general idea of what is in any given collection, your collection, and so that they can choose if they want to see a certain collection or not. So to give a bit of maybe an example or a context of the description of a collection of records is similar to maybe like a library catalog of a book. So, when you look up a book, there's a short description of the book, how many pages there are, who the author is, the synopsis of the book as well. It's a bunch of information about the book. And then you kind of make a choice if you want to take that book out or not, right? So instead of a book though, the records will be stored in special archival boxes, if they're physical, and on like digital servers, online if U of T if they're digital. So that's in a nutshell what I mean when I say that MiCA collects and organizes. And the other 2, preserve and making accessible, I'll talk about later tonight. Because first we have to talk about what I mean when I say record, and what I mean when I say we want your records. So what is a record? The best answer I can give is almost anything can be a record, anything that has some sort of information or data recorded on it, and in almost any medium or format too, almost in any medium. So on the screen here are some examples of record formats. I'm sure many of you recognize some, if not all of these formats, and maybe you have many, if not all of these in your home. So photographs, postcards, DVDs, VHS tapes, emails, and so much more. These record types can document almost anything. and almost any and all activities in one's life, in your lives, right? So maybe you have a flyer of a Quran competition, photos of family outings or international vacations, maybe some wedding videos or footage of the launch of some organization. All of the stuff has some sort of archival value because they document a Muslim community milestone, or they just document a single moment in your life. So these are just some examples of how your stuff can contribute, to the documentary heritage and the history of Canadian Muslims. But in summary, though, a record, if if I'm asked this question, I think I would say like a record is almost anything as long as we have some idea of its context, who made it, when it was made, why it was made, and so on. And it can present some kind of information to the viewer, whether physically or digitally. And actually, Amber, if you don't mind, um, we did have a couple of questions in the past few webinars about scanned or photocopies of documents. I wonder if Amber, if you could maybe address that, because we now have we have an idea of what we can do with that, and some of the options that are available to you if you are thinking about scanned or photocopies of original records.
No, I'm happy to tell you that. So, a number of questions we have. We've been really fortunate to be able to have some folks interested in donating to the archive, and as we're in conversations with them, the question comes up, well, do you want the original, or can we have the original and give you a copy? And we have to tell them very straightforwardly, we want the original, not the copy. And there's lots of reasons why. One is, of course, issues of pedigree, authenticity, to preserve the integrity of the document so we can attest to it. But what we're also finding is that as technology changes, we're able to do more with the holdings than we could have done even 20, 30 years ago. So for instance, here at the University of Toronto, there's a project called The Book on the Silk Road. It's a project led by two colleagues of mine who are wonderful medieval historians. And what they're doing is they're taking old medieval texts, 12th, 13th century texts, and they subject it to CT scans, various forms of electromagnetic scanning. They're able to use these scanning devices to determine, well, what's the glue binding the pages made of? What's the paper made of? Is there any dirt that you can locate in the fibers? Where could the dirt possibly be from? And the idea then is, no, it's not just that we're looking at a text for what it contains as words or whatnot, but we're actually able to say, well, the glue came from China, the paper came from somewhere else, and the ink came from yet another place. And all of a sudden, this one manuscript becomes it begins to epitomize, and it manifests in its materiality. It illustrates a trade network that must have existed to enable this text to be produced to begin with. You can't do that with a scan. You can't do it with a copy. You need the original for that kind of thing. So part of what we're doing at MiCA is also, as we plan in perpetuity, we have to anticipate the possibility of new technologies, allowing us to do more with what we have. And so going for the original allows us to maximize that range of possibilities.
Thank you, Amber. That was great. Um, I also wanted to add that that the original, just like Amber says, it gives a lot of context that just isn't available with a scan. So and it's hard to explain just because we can't anticipate what kind of context would be useful to a future user of the archive or a future researcher. You might have a researcher come in that is interested in a part of a record that you never thought would be useful. So for example, just remembering the last webinar, in the last webinar, my co-host for that webinar was Hassan Munir, and he brought up this this image of a newspaper clipping, and then on the newspaper clipping there was I don't remember what the date was, but it was definitely in this, maybe in the 60s. It was a Toronto-based newspaper, and it was just a reporter that was really interested in Muslims praying and Muslims attending Eid prayers. And so they were just interested in that. But because of their interview with the people there, the people mentioned the number of Muslims in Toronto at the time, so in the 60s. And so this newspaper, this journalist who went in there to ask about praying and Eid, was able to document also the number of Muslims at the time. So this becomes like, this becomes really important for a researcher now in the future who may not have gotten numbers in any other way. So my point is just that records may have information on them that you don't think is important, but in the future, a researcher might be actually researching that a little part of that of a record that you may have donated that you think is not important. So in that case, the original is like very important because a lot of nuance and a lot of context is lost if we receive photocopies. And that's not to say that we can't find some sort of solution if you really want to, if you really want your story to be featured, or sorry, if you really want your records in MiCA, we can figure out some sort of way. We can maybe do an oral history of your family or yourself. We are thinking about an oral history initiative at some point in the future. We can reflect your story in a different way, maybe. It's very subjective, and it's on a case-by-case basis always. Depends on what you're uncomfortable with and what you're comfortable with. So, but we'd love to talk to you about it individually, basically. It's just very subjective. Okay, so moving on. Thank you again, Anver. Right, so I wanted to also talk to you about what happens when you do donate your records to us. So maybe you're at the stage where you're comfortable with donating, or maybe you're not entirely comfortable, have questions. And either way, we want to talk, and we'd love to talk to you about where you're hesitant, and if you have any questions, we'd love to answer any of them. So let's chat, basically, as many times as you want. We're here for that. We're here because we know this is a very intimate thing, donating your personal records to an institution. And we want to make sure that you're comfortable and well informed during the entire process. We will at some point during our many conversations with you, send you something we call a self-assessment form. So this form has a few questions that once you answer and send it back to us, it will help guide us at MiCA to determine if your records are of interest to us or if they fit in our mandate. And it'll also kind of help you to sort any of your records to guide you as you look through your records. So the self-assessment form is not too long, and it has just a few questions, just like who owns the records, how much do you have a box, 2 boxes, a house full, just so that we have like a very slight idea of what's going on, and it helps us to guide further conversations. Right, so if we do want to know more about your records and maybe the self-assessment form wasn't enough or something, if we need more clarification, what we tend to do is something called a site visit. So a site visit is kind of basically when one of us at MiCA, most likely me at this point, visits the site where your records are currently housed. So this is oftentimes your home, and we look and assess the records, maybe talk to you about their context or any background history or anything like that, any questions we have after looking at your self-assessment form. We assess if it fits basically into our archive. We want to make sure that records fit into the broad mandate of MiCA, and if not, then we would guide you to maybe another archive that could possibly house your records instead. So if MiCA approves, we're okay with the archival donation and everything fits with our priorities. After the site visit, we'll be in contact with you to figure out, and negotiate what is called a deed of gift. And I can go over it for really quickly, but I was wondering, Anver, if you could pop in here to also talk about the legal stuff. But
Yeah.
so a deed of gift is kind of like just a formal contract between you as the donor and U of T, where you sign. So you sign over your ownership and title of the records. I don't know if that was an okay, Amber, but
Yeah,
please jump in
no,
and add what you need, because that's us. I'm not really good at the legal stuff. I'm an archivist, but so this is where I defer
no,
to you.
totally fine. So one of the things that we know is that um, handing over stuff to us is an intimate act. It's a personal act, and we recognize that for many communities, especially we have a number of refugee communities in Canada. The idea of simply giving your stuff to us to hold seems preposterous, and we appreciate that. We know it's a big ask for many communities. For some, maybe you've got a basement of stuff you want to just get rid of. You're using COVID to clear out your basement. We'll just say, hold it, give us a time to talk, and then we'll chat with you. But for some folks, the idea of physically actually just giving us ownership of it seems a bit extreme, and we want to talk about that for a moment. And so, why ownership? A number of reasons. One is if we don't own the records, but we hold the records, the physical copy, then we have to insure against any possible harm that might come to those records, and we just don't have the insurance. Literally, we don't have. The university doesn't provide us with the insurance to oversee that. That's just the economics of our institutional reality, and so we're not in that position to be able to do that. Second, by owning it, we're also able to have full ability and discretion to manage the stewardship. So for instance, right now, the Institute of Islamic Studies is in one location. Soon we'll be moving to a new location. And so by owning the material and owning the archival collection, we're able to move it physically to its new location, to its new site, without having to do all the sort of formal processes and consultation. It gives us the freedom to manage and steward as our institution and infrastructure shifts and changes. We're currently in conversation with the University of Toronto Libraries about possible storage sites. We want to be able to have the discretion to locate some material as MiCA grows. We won't be able to hold all of it in one location. We might need to put some of it in another location. And so to be able to have that flexibility is part of what comes with the actual ownership of it. But we recognize that it's part of a large conversation that we want to have with you, which is why, going back to number one, let's chat as many times as you want, right? You need to know that we are in this for the long haul, that we have a design to keep this moving in perpetuity, and that we're able to steward it in a way that no one else can. And if we're able to do that and meet your requirements, as we all think about lives beyond our own, then we have the ability to think in a shared space. So that's sort of the rationale for all the legalities of it.
Thanks, Amber. I also wanted to add too that you in the deed of gift you also do have a lot of power to restrict materials if you'd like. Um, so for example, if there's a folder or some photographs that maybe you don't want seen for another 10 years or something, or you have some sort of some reason for certain records in your collection not being available immediately, you have the ability to restrict those things too, through the negotiation of the deed as well. So the deed is really there to make sure we know what you want us to do with your records. There's also a section if you don't want certain things digitized on our online platforms. We can spell it out there on there as well. So again, just everything. It's not, although it's a contract, we just want to make sure that it's not super scary. We're pretty flexible. We can talk about it. Let's chat, just like Anver said. But it is something that unfortunately, we do have to do, considering we're part of a large institution like at U of T. So there's no way around it really. But once everything is signed, then we figure out a way to physically transfer your stuff to our facilities. And of course, once it is transferred, then I can bring in, archival processing, meaning, what I mentioned earlier about organizing. To put it simply, what I'll do is we'll go through your stuff, and I'll be able to sort it out and create that description like I mentioned earlier. And of course, during the entire process, I will be we will be in constant communication with you to make sure that if I have any questions about certain records or something like that, and especially you do have the opportunity to see the description before it's live or before it's finished or before it's made public, so you can edit that edit that afterwards as well. And one thing I'm just remembering is that I didn't actually mention or put on the slide is that we do have a procedure, like a process, a step, if you will, at MiCA called where we'd actually love to have you as a donor speak about your record. So this is an element I'm calling the impressions element. So maybe in an audio or in a video format or even written format, you can just kind of talk about your donation, talk about your records. What do you think is of value? What do you think is important? And so this just provides you as the donor of the records a chance to kind of speak to future users and researchers about your records and give them any sort of context that you think is important. And so basically, this is the archival donation process in an ideal non-pandemic world. Because of this pandemic, there are some things that we have to think about and some changes we do have to make. To make sure that we follow current public health guidelines. Obviously, first of all, we will not be able to visit. We're not going to be visiting your homes or storage lockers or wherever your stuff is located, because to ensure that we're maintaining physical distancing, and it's just obviously not safe to do so right now. Instead, like I said, we'll have to have multiple conversations either through Zoom, phone calls. Though preferably, we do prefer video so that we can actually see the records. That won't be just one. I do expect that there will be a couple that we would need to do a couple of these kinds of conversations and these kinds of virtual conversations. And like again, so most of our communications is going to have to be through video, phone calls, and even email too if it's for small things. Though we do prefer again video calls for if we're talking about records, or if you want to do like a show and tell of your records or something like that, especially for the assessment of your records by us. We do prefer the virtual Zoom sort of setting because we can't come physically, unfortunately, to see your records. Yes, so that also means that the negotiating and talking about the deed of gift, once you are comfortable, it will be again virtually, and we'll have to sign it virtually as well. And right, so in order to again ensure health and safety of both you and the MiCA staff, we would arrange for your donations to be picked up, like on the curb, a curbside kind of pickup by a third-party courier from you, and then kind of brought to our facilities. And I do want to mention too that if we also have the ability to provide you with boxes if you do need those as well. So we can send boxes to you as well, any sort of material to so that you can store them, and then we'll have the courier pick them up. Once it is at our facilities, it will be stored with us, and we won't be doing any sort of archival processing immediately of your materials until it's safe to kind of go back to work and go back to our buildings and our offices. and until we can, ensure the virus isn't lingering on your material. So there have been many tests done to determine how long the virus stays on certain types of material. So again, so we want to make sure that our staff don't go near the virus, don't catch the virus in some way because it's lingering on your materials and you don't know about it, right? So this is all, again, just to make sure this entire process is as safe as possible. And Anver, if you have any additions here that I forgot, please go ahead. But I think I covered everything.
No, you did. One of the
Okay.
things that we're just talking about is, we've made arrangements for the institute to arrange for these details, from third-party shipping to shipping and receivables here at U of T, and supplies. So we want to, because normally we would be in your homes doing a site visit, helping with the collections, and really facilitating the work of going through this, because it can be really time consuming. Since we can't do that due to COVID, we want to cover other costs associated with collection, shipment, and transport. So thank you very much for considering this, and then of course we want to really try to help you along the process.
Okay. So in this like hypothetical situation that now we have your records, what do we do with them exactly? And so we're back to the slide again. Like I said, like I said before, I'll talk about now the second two kind of processes, preserving and making accessible. So what does that mean? So MiCA preserves, which kind of just means that we'll take the steps, the necessary steps to ensure the protection and preservation of your records at the University of Toronto for potential use in the future. So we're just making sure that they're in special archival boxes, that we use standard archival procedure to make sure that they're preserved. And finally, MiCA makes us accessible. So like I mentioned already, we'll create a description and make this description available on our catalog or in a description database of your collection. And once the description is available, anyone can kind of browse it, just like a library catalog, to see what kind of records each collection holds. And then they make requests to see materials from different collections. So that's kind of what it means to make accessible. MiCA will provide access to the records in its archives, both physically and, where applicable, digitally on its online platforms. And that's MiCA collects, organizes, preserves, and makes accessible. That's in a nutshell what we do for now anyway. We are looking to do more interactive programming in the future, as well as some workshops and maybe teaching more educational events where I can teach about archives, maybe even in classrooms to teach kids. And like I mentioned earlier, we are thinking about an oral history initiative in the future as well. So there's a lot of possibilities in the future. This is just the basic kind of our very basic idea of what archives do. So, and now that we have heard about how you can contribute records and how you can donate your records, we can move on to how other ways you can contribute to MiCA. So again, I'll pass it off again to Dr. Emon to talk about financial donations.
Thank you. So I know that I'm not here to belabor the point, but right now MiCA is able to exist due to, as a director of the institute, I've made this a priority at the institute while I'm director, and obviously trying to an archive is only as good as it is supported in perpetuity. So part of what we're also looking at is creating an endowment for MiCA, an endowment that would effectively using the overhead that we already have at the university, right? We have all the support, we have the institutional support, we have a lot of things that we're able to limit the costs, but one thing that we need is staff. is a human. It's the human element, the human, the archivist. So so we're delighted that we have Moska. We want to keep Moska, but we know that, you know, as we grow, as this is not about Moska, this is not about me, this is about the future. And so being able to ensure that there is someone here who will do the painful work, the detailed work of going through materials, cataloging it, describing it, organizing it, making sure that the formats are evolving as technology changes, advocating for the archive. Takes a person, this takes a human being who we need to constantly replace as each generation moves, as each generation frankly dies. So this is a project of planning for perpetuity. And so right now we're delighted we have some seed money from the Social Science and Humanities Research Council to seed the project. And that's what allows us to cover the costs of like the logistics of transport and whatnot. And we're really grateful for the support and commitment of that federal agency and the peer reviewers that supported this project. So, and it's a sign that it's recognized as a viable project. And in fact, we want to applaud our colleagues at Memorial, Jennifer Selby, who's on the call, and Aisha Kinturk, who's also on the call here today on the webinar out of Newfoundland. They received a small grant to begin creating a similar model out in Newfoundland, Labrador. And our hope is, of course, to showcase to all that we can expand the scope of this out from Ontario and to across Canada. So we're hoping that you will share the news of MiCA, share the videos, help your own community members gain a little bit of literacy around why it's important to think archivally. And, you know, while they're considering their own collections and what records they might be donating to us, to identify possible sources of funding for us, because for us, this is a project out of love, out of affection, but out of hope. And that's what we are hoping for. So I won't belabor the point here, but I'll be coming back to all of you at various points. I'm sure you'll hear me at other events around MiCA talking about endowing it, but it's an important endowment for us to ensure that this maintains itself for all of us and for all of our progeny. So thank you for that. Moska, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Anver, again. I did want to also add that the email that everybody will be receiving following this webinar will also include a link to a link that will let you donate financially as well to MiCA. So just look out for that as well in the email. But there are ways that you can also contribute to MiCA if outside of records or financial donations. Just like Anver mentioned, promoting and talking about us with your friends and families, your colleagues, is one of the best ways to make sure we get our project is spread as far as possible. So of course, if we'd love it if you could do that and of course, if you need any flyers or promotional materials, visuals, even the language to explain what we are and what we do, you can connect with us and we'll be happy to provide that for you as well. The second one is the one I'm really excited about, and I'm basically invite us to speak to your audience. If you're a part of an organization, have a large audience, or you have any sort of platform with an audience, I'd love to come virtually, of course, to talk to you, your audience, about MiCA and spread the word that way. So please invite me to your spaces. I can go on and on about MiCA. That might be probably, at least in my opinion, probably might be the easiest ways too, if you don't know or you're not able to explain what an archive is or what MiCA does yourself. Probably it might be easiest for me to come and do like a similar presentation like this. And of course, the third one, suggest leads to us. So if you know of a person, organization, or a body of records that you think would fit well with MiCA's objectives, we'd love to learn more about it. So I keep mentioning the follow-up email, but basically in the follow-up email following this webinar, you'll receive also a link to a form that you can fill out if you have any suggestions. So please use that form to give us any of your ideas or suggestions, and be as detailed as possible if you can. If you can't, that's okay too. And we can follow up with you if we're interested, or if something catches our eye. And the fourth one is, so I kind of have a very informal group of, well, now friends, but they are an advisory team in my head, of people that that specialize in Canadian Muslim history, or specialize in archives or community archives, things like that, and who I consult sometimes. So I can't claim to know everything or every bit of information or history of all Canadian Muslims in every corner of Canada. That's not my specialty, but I do know that there are people out there that are passionate about this, who do specialize in these topics. And I'd love to be able to pick your brain, or be able to ask you or consult with you if I come across something maybe in a part of Canada that I don't have any sort of connection to whatsoever, but you do, right? So I have a few people right now that I can connect with for help, but if I don't know the history of a certain area or something along those lines, or some sort of archival process, and if you are someone that is willing to contribute your knowledge, I'd greatly appreciate that as well. So if you'd like to contribute your knowledge to this very informal group of advisors, it's a very formal term, advisors, but if you'd like to contribute your knowledge like that, I would greatly appreciate it. And please connect with me directly. So my email, my contact information will be on the last slide. So please note it down. And also, if there are any suggestions you have in other ways that you'd like to get involved that are not on this list or we didn't go over today, just connect with me or email me. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. So I'd love to hear what you have in mind.